Episode 10 already. I'm Adam Pellerin along with Judd Sirott. We got a great show to celebrate double digits, Judd. We got the great legendary Hall of Famer Brad Park joining us. Looking forward to that conversation as he gets honored at their tradition later this month. We'll also hear from Maine head coach Ben Barr in his conversation with Billy Jaffe. The Black Bears with a huge matchup against Boston College on Friday night at Conti Forum in a game that you can see right here on Nesson. And, of course, we will talk about the Boston Bruins. We'll take a look at the road ahead. You got the Flames and Senators at home as the Bruins face off against old friend Linus Ullmark. But first, Judd, well, I want to just ask how you doing. How are you, buddy?
I'm all right. Would have been better if the Bruins were able to make it 3 consecutive wins. But unfortunately, it was Toronto that came out on top. They certainly were able to capitalize on the power play and were able to capitalize without Auston Matthews in the lineup.
Yeah, now 13-6-0 without Auston Matthews in the lineup since the 21-22 season. We'll get into all that. The special teams play, again, taking way too many penalties at inopportune times. But first, let's get to the interview with Jim Montgomery after the Bruins 4-0 loss. Here's what the head coach had to say to Andy Brickley.
Jim, certainly the power play, Toronto's power play, the difference on the scoreboard, but was their goaltender the biggest difference in this game tonight?
Well, those two combined, right? Special teams, their power play was, like you said, and their goaltender, he seemed to see the puck really well tonight. There was a lot of pucks that were going through traffic from the bench, and we didn't think he saw it, and then the last thing you know, a leg or an arm or a blocker would come out and knock it away.
Is it the penalties themselves that's frustrating, or could you have defended better as far as the PK is concerned?
It's probably a combination. You can't take that many penalties. But we had just as many power plays, so it was just one of those games where, we weren't as effective as they were on the special teams.
Did you like what you generated in terms of offense tonight? Was this a winnable hockey game in your mind?
Yeah, very winnable. There's a lot of things that we're seeing that the team is growing in the right direction. We don't like to score. And obviously, we need to continue to improve. But we do see elements of our game coming. Like our defensive structure is getting better. We got to continue to just develop our offense.
Thanks, Monty.
Thanks.
It's just those dang special teams, Judd, creeping in again for the Bruins. And, I know you and Brick said the same thing after the first period. This was a competitive game, and it really was representative of the games we've seen between these two teams over the last couple of years in the regular season, the postseason. I know the Bruins had an 8-game winning streak in the regular season, but a lot of close games in there. Obviously, the 7-game playoff series that we've seen between these two teams, in particular, the last one, which was very tight. But just your reaction to what Jim Montgomery had to say first, Jim.
Well, there's in a very short amount of time, I think there's a lot to unpack. And let me start with what he said toward the tail end, and that was about structure. Because 5-on-5, the Bruins were fine last night. And if you look here in the last couple of games, heading into that Toronto game, they recorded back-to-back shutouts. And yes, both Swayman and Korpisalo were terrific, but the Bruins didn't also give up a lot. They also stayed out of the box, which we can talk a little bit more about. But I think when I think about the big picture of this team, Adam, and I don't know if you feel the same way, that maybe in the first 4 or 5 weeks, the structure defensively hasn't necessarily been there, and now slowly you're starting to see that 5-on-5 structure come back. And I think that that's important because that will lead, and this was something that Brick mentioned yesterday during the telecast, that if the Bruins are able to check better on a more consistent basis, they're going to have the puck more. And if you have the puck more, you're going to be better positioned to be able to score goals or draw penalties or head on to the power play. Yes, you've got to finish. But I think that was the first thing that stuck out for me. The other thing, when he talked about Anthony Stolarz and his effort last night, and I think it was twofold. First, he didn't want to take away from the kid's effort. He was terrific last night. And I know Brick and I had talked about it at the tail end of the game. He was probably not a guy during free agency that moved the needle, but this could be one of the most important signings of the summer for any team around the National Hockey League. He's 6'6". He's a big guy. He used that size effectively, and the Bruins did have some tip opportunities. They did have some screens, but I think the other thing he talked about is, could they have taken away a little bit more of his vision? Could they have gone to the hard areas a little bit more? Could they have generated a few more second opportunities? And I think the other thing that he mentioned was we're still trying to develop the offense that's where some of the offense has to come. They are 28th as we talk right now in offense overall, 29th on the power play. And I understand that these numbers are going to fluctuate, but in 5-on-5 goals scored, they've played 14 games. They've scored 19 5-on-5 goals. That number has to pick up.
Yeah, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that they're not 5-on-5 all that often, Judd. Let's be honest. They're taking a lot of these penalties, and that's the big story in last night's game, or I should say Tuesday night's game.
Well, Adam, it's not to cut you off. It's who's taking them.
Judd. You did. You cut me off.
Who's taking them? When are you taking them? The Toronto game was a perfect example. So the Leafs score. Morgan Riley rifles one in from the blue line through a screen, 1-0. And shortly thereafter, on virtually the next shift, the Bruins take an offensive zone penalty, and David Pastrnak goes off for high sticking. And the Leafs score again on the power play a minute and 14 seconds after that, after they open the scoring. So you're seeing it's the sequence of when these things are happening, how often they are happening, that I think is something that the team is trying to get a handle on.
They've taken the most minors in the National Hockey League. They're way ahead of last year's pace, and they were near the top of the league in that category last year, which just tells you how frequent we're seeing this. And the next closest team to them in that category is the Toronto Maple Leafs, team you saw last night, a team that committed just as many penalties as the Bruins. The difference was that the Bruins couldn't capitalize on their opportunities. But just to add to some of those offensive woes that the Bruins are having, and the 5-on-5 you mentioned, they're 27th in high danger chances for 5-on-5. They're tied for last in high danger goals for in that category as well. So they had a season low 2 high danger chances last night, 5-on-5 against the Maple Leafs. But again, because they were in the penalty box so much, they're not 5-on-5 as much. But, in terms of the penalties that they're taking, and we talked about it, on the pre and post game show. I mean, we've talked about it all year. We talked about it mostly post game because of how things played out last night. It's the type of penalties they're taking. It's where they're taking them, to your point. There's a lot of stick penalties, and it seems to be contagious, Judd. We saw in the game against the Stars where the Bruins allowed 3 power play goals in a span of 8 minutes, and it was one penalty after another. And it got to the point where Jim Montgomery pulled his team to the bench, had the whiteboard out, and was imploring them, whatever he was saying in that meeting, basically, I'm sure, get your acts together. And, it just seems to be contagious with this team. I don't know why. I don't know if it's panic setting in terms of trying to force things, when things aren't going well, that you grab your stick a little bit harder, you try to make a play, maybe, perhaps, not to get too deeply into the psychology of it, but that's what we're seeing so far with this team.
Well, you mentioned psychology, and clearly the issue is mostly between the ears. That when we talk about the penalties, but it's beyond that. I think. Look at the game in Carolina. The Bruins allowed a rash of goals both in the first period and in the second period in that game. If you want to go all the way back, I think the Bruins early in the season had a hard time coming out of the gate against the Florida Panthers, or taking too many penalties in the rematch against the Florida Panthers. So I think a lot of coaches and players will talk about around the National Hockey League. Listen, it takes some time, even for guys that have been around a long time, as a group to become battle-hardened. And that's what you have to hope happens here with the Bruins, that as they go through this issue, and they've got a number of different issues that they're dealing with, as they deal with this adversity, that hopefully they become battle-hardened because of it.
Hope a veteran like Tyler Johnson can help, right? I mean, he was in the lineup for the first time on Tuesday night, and that's one of the things that Jim Montgomery pointed out was his veteran presence. Hopefully a guy like that can maybe help get you through this, Judd.
I think that's certainly one of the things that can help. And one of the things that Jim Montgomery, to your point, had brought up is that he's going to be a helpful voice on the ice and on the bench in the room. And one of the things that he mentioned to Andrew Raycroft in the first intermission of that Toronto game, 2 perimeter. That was in the first period where the game was still, okay, you're on the road. You've gone through the opening 20 minutes. You're in a scoreless game at this point. But I think he could recognize some of the things that you were talking about. So the Bruins, I guess, credited with 2 high-danger chances against Toronto. They've got to get to the middle of the ice, and they've got to do it a little bit more often, and that's something that he recognized. He looked fine, certainly in his Bruins debut. It's going to take some time, and he's talked about this. You can't just skate by yourself or practice with the team and expect to be game ready. So there's going to be it's going to take him a little while to ramp himself up. So the Bruins have games against Calgary and Ottawa. They're going to head on the road to St. Louis and Dallas. And I would imagine here in the next 2 weeks, you're going to see an improvement in his play.
Perfect segue to the preview of the next couple of games at home, Judd. Taking on the Calgary Flames and the Ottawa Senators. In terms of Calgary, you have a couple of guys on the Bruins roster this year that were part of the Calgary team last year that is obviously in a rebuild mode. I'm talking about Elias Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov, some more turnover as well. The goaltender, Jacob Markstrom in New Jersey. Chris Tanev, we just saw him last night with the Maple Leafs. He went to the Stars last year and now in Toronto. What are your impressions of this Flames team?
This is a young, scrappy team. You got Craig Conroy, who's basically... I think it's in his second season as the general manager in Calgary, and I think he's trying to turn over this roster, generate some prospects. He's got some more roster decisions that he's going to have to make as the season rolls along. But he's got a scrappy group here early in the season. They picked up some wins. They picked up a terrific overtime win over the Montreal Canadiens. I'm sure Marty St. Louis is smarting over that because it's been a difficult time for him. He's got some guys who are definitely difference makers, and one of them is going to be Rasmus Andersson, who's off to a great start. He's got 4 goals and 11 points here early in the season. He's also a guy who likes to stir the pot, and I guarantee that Nikita Zadorov and Elias Lindholm will be able to tell some stories about Rasmus Andersson. He's a guy who goes under the radar as one of the better defensemen around the National Hockey League. But you've got Jonathan Huberdeau and Blake Coleman. Nazem Kadri is on that team. So they have some worthy veterans, but this is a group that is trying to build from within. I don't see them as a playoff team this year, and hopefully the Bruins can cash in and take advantage on Thursday night.
Young player in Connor Zary as well up in Calgary. So that'll be an interesting matchup. Meanwhile, looking forward to Saturday night and the return of Linus Ullmark, assuming that he's going to get the start, assuming we're going to have a Swayman-Ullmark matchup. We'll see how it plays out. But he's off to a bit of a slow start with the Senators. Had to deal with a little bit of an injury. Your thoughts on that game on Saturday?
Well, Ottawa's had a mess of a problem winning on the road. They've been terrific at home. They haven't been able to win on the road. And Linus Ullmark, his numbers, they're pretty basic at this point. You got a goals against /3 and a save percentage at .892, and I think that they were expecting better. But for the Bruins in particular, Adam, I think if the Bruins fashion themselves as a playoff team, I think that that's one of the teams you're going to have to finish in front of. So the Ottawa Senators, they have started to at least stabilize the organization. You've got new ownership. Steve Stais is in his first full season as the general manager. He essentially, maybe that, let me take that back. This is his second season as the general manager. Yeah. You got Travis Green in his first full year as the head coach in Ottawa. But there were a lot of distractions around the Senators for a long time. But this is a team that's been knocking on the door and has thought of itself as a playoff team in the Eastern Conference, haven't been able to break through. I think the last time they were in the playoffs was maybe the 16-17 season, if I'm not mistaken. But if you're the Bruins, this is a team that you need to finish in front of. So take advantage in the first meeting of the season on Saturday night at TD Garden.
Yeah, a couple of games that the Bruins really, if you look at it, they have to have, they have to have in order to bounce back. And, that's kind of how we looked at the games against the Flyers and the Kraken at TD Garden. And by the way, you talk about the last time the Senators were in the playoffs. Well, they actually ended up beating the Bruins in that playoff series, which was Charlie McAvoy's NHL debut. All right, so that is what's ahead for the Black and Gold. And right now you're listening to or maybe watching the Hockey Hub podcast. You can watch or listen to us either on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Amazon Music, or wherever podcasts are found. And right now, we have a very special guest joining us here on the Hockey Hub podcast. Here is me and Judd's conversation with Hall of Famer Brad Park. And joining us now is a very special guest, one of the greatest players in Bruins history, a Hockey Hall of Famer, one of the 100 greatest players of all time, elected to the All-Centennial team for the Bruins last year to celebrate the centennial season. Just so many accolades and honors on his resume, and the latest being honored by the Sports Museum in Boston at the tradition coming up on November 20th. It's former Bruins defenseman Brad Park. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Hockey Hub podcast, Brad.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
And looking forward to this conversation. I guess we'll just start by being honored at their tradition. What does that mean to you to receive the Legacy Award for hockey?
Well, I think the Sports Museum, the tradition, really kind of honors talented players that were part of the community. So not everybody gets to go there. So I'm very very happy and impressed that they asked me to participate.
Brad, that's a pretty star-studded group that you're going to be inducted with. Rob Gronkowski, Terry Francona, Dara Torres, Scott Hamilton, Dee Brown. Are you looking forward to having a conversation with anybody in particular?
Well, I think everybody naturally say, Gronk is such a character. Terry Francona, just the intelligence he had to control things in the in the locker room. Those would be very interesting conversations.
Is it cool for you, Brad, to talk to professional athletes from other sports just to get their perspective on what their careers were like, what their journey was like as well?
It is. The problem is that usually a lot of these functions or ceremonies, you really don't get to sit down and have a lengthy conversation. I think one of the great conversations is years and years ago, I played in a baseball game up in Lewiston with Dave Cowens, and he has a place on the lake where I am. And we drove a couple hours back, and we had a great conversation about a lot of similarities, a lot of differences between the basketball and the hockey. So that was very enlightening for me.
Brad, I want to take that a little bit further. So you were in Boston basically through the mid-'70s into the early '80s. So did you have a chance to shoot the breeze with some other players on some of the other teams, whether it was the Celtics, the Red Sox, or the Patriots during those times?
Not really. The seasons varied for the different sports. Did spend a little bit of time talking to Kevin McHale. For some reason, we had scheduling. We were on the road. We were at the same place at the same time, and he was a terrific guy to talk to.
So, obviously, your history in the game of hockey is vast. I'm wearing an Original Six T-shirt. You played for half of the teams on this list: the Bruins, Rangers, and closing out your career with the Red Wings. Let's just take it back to your battles against the Bruins when you were a member of the New York Rangers in the postseason in the Stanley Cup Final. What was it like going up against the Big Bad Bruins?
Well, the Bruins and the Rangers in the 60s went from the two worst teams in the league to the two best teams in the league. And, with the rivalry between New York and Boston, the Knicks and the Celtics, the Red Sox and the Yankees, and the Bruins and the Rangers, it was just a natural rivalry. And as the two teams got to be the top ones in the league, they really didn't like each other. If you walked into a restaurant or a bar and you saw, Boston Bruins sitting in there, you turned around and walked out. It was just that mentality that you had to have.
So I guess with that in mind, Brad, so when the trade happens in November of 1975, and for a lot of people, they may not have remembered that blockbuster, you come from the Rangers to the Bruins along with Jean Rattel and Joe Zanussi, Phil Esposito, Carol Vadnais head the other way and play for the Blue Shirts. How long did it take you before you were able to settle in with the Bruins?
Well, I think it wasn't the first night. I'll tell you that. It was the last place that I really wanted to go was Boston, because when I was with the Rangers, I was got such animosity in my fan mail that the FBI used to walk me on the ice and off the ice in the Boston Garden because of the threats I would get. So I wasn't too happy when I first heard about it. And then, you kind of get a reality check because you start to get mad that the team that, you belong to didn't want you anymore. And that was the attitude I took. I got a little mad and went to the Bruins and realized it was going to be a shock for them when I walk in the dressing room, as well as Jean Rattel. So, but when we got to the rink, the first guy that came out of the dressing room to meet me out, under the stands was Bobby Orr, and that kind of softened the entrance.
Yeah, I want to get to playing with Bobby Orr in a second, but just in terms of when the trade happened, just doing my research, I mean, you were in Vancouver with the Rangers, and then the next game you played was in Vancouver with the Bruins, which is kind of crazy. That must have been an absolute whirlwind, just an unusual situation to say the least.
It was. I mean, we played in Vancouver and we beat them like 4-1. I think Jean Rattel was first star and I was second star. And then we go to Oakland, and 7:30 in the morning, I get a phone call to come to the coach's room, and right then I knew I'd been traded. So because they don't call you at 7:30 in the morning to talk strategy, and when I walked up there, I said to Ron Stewart, I said, he opened the door. I said, "Where am I going?" He says, "You're going to Boston." I said, "Boston? I'm going to Boston?" I said, "Who am I going for?" He says, "Esposito." "I'm going for Phil Esposito?" I says, "No, you and Jean Rattel." I said, "Jean Rattel and I for Esposito?" "No, we got Vadnais." 2 for 2? "No, we're throwing in Joe Zanussi." And it was like, oh, really? And when we get to Boston or to Vancouver, we go back there to play. And, we hear the rumors in the morning. Wayne Cashman was so upset. All the stuff, the beds and the couches and everything in his hotel room ended up in the parking lot. So that was like, well, this is going to be interesting. And, but by the time we got there and we lost in Vancouver, we went to Oakland, played there next, beat them, and then went back to Boston, and, we kind of got on a tear.
Brad, when you went from one team to the next, and you mentioned, for a while the Bruins and the Rangers were at the bottom, and then they started to move to the top, and obviously you guys had a chance to meet in the Stanley Cup final. But was there anything that struck you that was different coming to the Bruins culture from the culture you had left with the Rangers?
Yeah, one of the things that was different is with the Rangers, the day of the game, we always had a team meal, and we all ate together. And with the Bruins, they didn't have a team meal. You kind of eat on your own. So, I mean, that was a little bit of difference. I think the other difference was the time it took to get to the rink. In New York, we lived out in Long Beach, about an hour and 15 minutes out of New York. We only went in for the games. In Boston, I ended up living in Linfield, and it was a 15-minute ride. So that was a huge difference, just the size of the city.
I do want to just get back to something that I read, which I thought was just just a great story from right after you were traded to Boston. You talk about Bobby Orr being very gracious in your first meeting with him, but what was your first meeting like with Terry O'Reilly?
That's a very interesting thing. Yeah, prior to coming to Boston, I think it was a year before, Terry and I got into it. I was coming out of my zone with the puck. It was in New York, and I was making a pass, and he come from my left side, and as he came over, down he goes. And he's on the ice on his knees, and I take his head and I jam it into the ice, and I split him up the middle. And he comes after me, and we end up, in a wrestling match, we end up on the ice, and he's on top of me, and we're like nose to nose, and he's bleeding on me. And he said, "You jammed my head in the ice." I said, "You're goddamn right." I said, "You tried to break my ankle and fall on it." He said, "I did not. I'm just clumsy." So now for the next 2 games we played against them, right, is every time I played, it was on the ice with Terry, I was dancing like Barishnikov from the ballerina. He was taking runs at me, and I'm doing pirouettes and everything to get out of his way. So now we haven't played each other in the year I got traded. And I walk into the dressing room there. I go walk around. I put my hand out to say hello to Terry, and he puts his hand out and he pulls it back, and he says, "I owe you." And I said, "Yeah, you probably do." So once a month for a number of years when I was there in practice, every once in a while he would cold cock me and knock me on my ass, and I'd look up to him and say, "Are we done yet?" He said, "Not yet." That was Taz.
What did Cherry have to say?
Cherry didn't know anything. It wasn't like he took a real cheap shot at me, but he just knocked me on my ass, right? And Cherry was all for that, right?
That's fantastic that he was able to stick up with you. Brad, I know it was just such a limited amount of time that you and Bobby Orr were together, but when you finally had a chance to play with him as a teammate, was there something in particular that really stuck out?
The idea was, as Don Cherry said, one of you is going to be on the ice all the time. That's what we want to do. You will be together on the power play. So we were on the power play, and Bobby always played the right sides, and I did too in New York. But but with Bobby, I moved to the left side, and up front we had Wayne Cashman, John Rattel, and John Busick. You had 5 guys that were very good with the puck, never panicked, could thread the puck through skates, over sticks, between legs. And the power play was just, Bobby, neither one of us would have a problem gaining the zone. So we always got in the zone under control, and then we just move it around. And I believe that the power play was like 50% for the 10 games that we played together.
Just incredible. And to think about your time with Bobby Orr, you had some time with Ray Bourque as well to be able to play with both of those defensemen. And then, obviously there was sort of a change in turnover of the roster with some younger players toward the end of your career in Boston, Barry Peterson, Rick Middleton, and Ray Bourque, to name a few. What was that transition like?
Well, I think when, in the late 70s, going into the 80s, I would come home from the rink, and my wife would say, "You want to go play with the kids?" And I said, "No, I've been playing with them all day." Because they were all kids, very talented. Ray was great to play with. He was like a sponge. I kind of mentored him for 4 years, and he was just absorbed everything. From handling the puck, looking for people, going against the flow, staying on your feet when you had to. So he was just a real sponge about the the strategy of the game. And so he was. We also had Brad McCrimmon, who came in with Ray and made a pretty good impression in the Boston team. Barry Peterson came in, and he and Rick Middleton clicked into an unbelievable line. And Mike Krushinski was a young guy that came in and really, made the third guy in that line. He still had the Peter McNabb and the Terry O'Reilly and Stan Jonathan or John Wensick. So they were very forceful line, and they were fun to play with.
Since we bring up the names like Orr along with yourself and Raymond Bourque, who you had a chance to play with, if you sort of take a wider view, is it pretty incredible the legacy of defensemen that the Bruins have had in franchise history?
I think I don't think there was Eddie Shore was probably the most dominant defenseman, back in the 20s and 30s, and so charismatic. But once they didn't have anybody over the years generally that was, kind of taking the puck for a whirl till Bobby showed up, and Bobby changed the theme of the game, that the defenseman could control the game, come late, and get into the rush. And Bobby and I are the same age. He's a few months older than I. He came in into the league as an 18-year-old. I came in as a 20-year-old. But it was after us, the one guy that steered the team for many years was Harry Sinden. And Harry Sinden, he played with one world champion. He was a defenseman, and he knew the value of having a dominant defenseman. And I think when I got traded here, Bobby was just coming back from an injury, and Harry actually had inside knowledge because he knew he coached Team Canada in '72 of the Summit Series, and he knew what type of player I was, what type of player John Rattel was. He also knew what type of personalities we were. And then, I got there and Bobby went out, and we still had success. And then, that's why he went after Ray Bourque. He wanted, again, to have that dominant defenseman. And you can go, right up until, Zdeno Chara, somebody that's really going to make an impression on the blue line.
Brad, I wanted to ask you about the centennial season with the Bruins, honoring all of the eras of Bruins hockey, obviously you being a big part of that, and then selected to the all-centennial team. What did that honor mean to you?
It was an interesting thing. I was living it was in the winter, so I was in Florida, and they were having a big function, and I ended up saying, okay, I'll come up for the opening night and everything like that, but I can't stay for the dinner because I got a doctor's appointment. I got to go back to Florida. And, Charlie Jacobs called me and said, Brad, I'm not supposed to tell you, but you're on the Centennial team. Do you think you could stay over? And I said, Charlie, I think I can now. So it was quite an honor.
Brad, when you watch the Bruins or just the National Hockey League in general now, is there anybody that catches your eye that you find yourself watching?
Yeah, I think, definitely the Makar out in Colorado is a heck of a player. What I look for with most guys, if they're going to be a puck-controlling defenseman, their ability to go back against the flow with the puck. One of the things that I've always said is that when you come around that net, the first thing you see is the first thing they see. So it might not be the right play. So you got to learn to be able to go back against the flow, and you got to hold it long enough till the hole's open. So I look for those type of guys, and then I look for the guys that defensively we will not necessarily block shots, but get to shots before they leave the stick. That's closing the gap, And it means that they're in control because they're not backing off waiting for something to happen. They're dictating what happens.
Well, Brad Park, we really appreciate you taking the time to join Judd and I here on the Hockey Hub podcast. We look forward to the tradition on November 20th at TD Garden, where you will be honored along with other former athletes as well. Tickets on sale at sportsmuseum.org and tdgarden.com right now. Brad, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. I look forward to going to the tradition in a couple of weeks, and you guys take care.
Congrats. Thank you.
For more on the Bruins and the biggest trending news in the sports world, check out Boston Has Entered the Chat, hosted by George Bellecci and Travis Thomas, available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, and wherever else podcasts are found. Looking forward to a matchup in Hockey East on Friday night right here on Nesson. Maine taking on Boston College. Here's Billy Jaffe's interview with Black Bears head coach Ben Barr.
And always great to catch up with this guy, Ben Barr from Maine. 4th year at Maine. Your team off to a very solid 6-0-1 start. I'll start with the basic question. What have you liked most so far from your team early in the season?
Thanks for having me. I think we have more depth than we've had at any point since our staff's been up here. We have 4 lines and 7D that can play for us every night. We're solid right through from the net on out. I don't think anyone would accuse us of being a flashy team in any way, shape, or form, but the guys work hard and we have depth. So far it's worked out.
Coach, is this kind of what you envisioned, what you wanted your team to look like? When you started a couple of years ago, you knew it would take some time, whether it's systems, whether it's the type of player, et cetera. Is this kind of where you wanted it to see, how you thought it would look eventually at Maine?
I don't know if you get too caught up in how it would look. I think the thing that I think that's really nice as a staff is it's where you want your culture to be. And that's taking some time. But right now we have a group of leaders that have been here for 3 or 4 years. We've added some really good, transfer players that have fit that culture really well. So you're not spending, as coaches, you're not spending a ton of time, on things outside of, hey, this is how we get better on the ice, and that's the nice part is that they're all going in the right direction. They're really good students. They care. It means more to them than just a hockey game, especially those guys that have been here for 3, 4. Some of them are on we have a 5th year, Lyndon Breen's a 5th year player. Like, these guys care incredibly about this program and this school. And that's, I think, what's really driving it.
You mentioned depth, and I'm looking at both your offense and your defense. The offensive numbers pop out, almost 4.5 goals a game. Defensively, even more dramatic, 1.29 right now. You're number 1 in the NCAA. Let's talk about your defensive depth, starting in goal, but then also the team structure and the depth there. Why have you guys been so darn tough to score against so far?
I think Elvin Boy has been really good for us. He's our goalie. He's played pretty much every minute for us so far. He makes the saves that he needs to make. And he's always, even if he hasn't seen a real great chance in a while, he's always gonna, then we give up a breakaway or a 2-on-0 or something which has happened, and he makes those saves, and that's so it's credit to him mentally and how he approaches the game. Our D-core, and David Brazil and Brandon Holt are 2 guys that have been here for 3 or 4 years with us, and they're not flashy players, but they're leaders on the ice. They're also leaders off the ice, and then you add Frank Jurasevic was a transfer for us, and Brandon Chabrier, Grayson Arnott, Luke Antonacci have been here for 3 years now. So they're veteran, and they understand, what it takes to have success at this level, and they're hardworking, good kids. So, they're kind of some unheralded players, as far as the maybe the big picture and NHL stuff, but they've turned themselves into players that are really good players at our level, and it really is just a credit to the kind of people they are more than anything.
You've gotten offensive depth too. You've balance in there. I mean, Harrison Scott putting up tons of points right now, but you mentioned Holt from the back end. He's putting up points, or point per game. Last year he had 15 points. This year he already has 11. But you also mentioned transfers, and whether it's a Charlie Russell or a Taylor McCarr, what have these transfers meant to you for offense as well? Because you guys are scoring 4.5 goals a game.
Yeah, I mean, Taylor is having, so far his best, his best year in college, which is great. And Charlie Russell's come here. I kind of view him as a freshman because he just only played a few games before he went back to junior last year, so he feels like a freshman. And he just, he's just a really good hockey player, does everything well, and is kind of a rat on the ice. Ross Mitten is a really good player that came here from Colgate. Owen Fowler's a player from Lowell that's coming. Like, all those guys have given us something. They're all good hockey players, and that the production is nice, but they're responsible two-way guys. And if you're not a team that has 12 drafted forwards or 5 first-round picks or something like that, you need to have really solid two-way hockey players that when the play's there, they can make it, but they're also really responsible. And I think that's first and foremost kind of the way the way our forward groups approach it. And we're getting production from everybody just because we have 12 guys we feel that can play every night, and there's some guys that haven't even got a chance yet that could probably fit right in there. And it's a nice thing to have.
I never will say that recruiting is easy. That I understand, because it is not. It is a constant fill the pipeline thing. But with the success that your team had last year, Ben, and with how you're doing already this year, and I know it's early, but it's impressive. Have you noticed recruiting changing a bit for you guys in any way, whether it's a different type of player, a different interest, a different skill set? Have you noticed that? And what have you noticed, if so?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's recruiting is changing, just for us, Billy. I think it's more recruiting is just changing in general now, because our world is changing every day. And I probably said this to you last year. Like, the only thing I think that matters in recruiting now, when I started, it was like, how many games are you going to go see can you see 200 games on the road as an assistant coach? And, the more you see, the better you recruit, the harder you work, the better your recruiting is going to be. It's not really like now when the rules have changed and technology has changed, I think that's changed a lot now, where I think the only thing that matters is that our players feel like they're getting better, and they're in a program where they have a chance to win. And then the recruiting kind of takes care of itself. And, we saw that last year. Players come up here, and the other advantage that we have, which is really incredible, is playing at the Alphon.
Yeah.
Players come up here, and it's like, if they, they don't know, and this isn't, this is just the way it is now in our world. Like, you play against another team, and you're not, but then those are sometimes the calls you're getting in the spring, because when that wasn't a thing 5, 6, 8 years ago or whatever, right? Like, hey, so and so, and that's so. I think recruiting is just changing in general, and we're all, and it's going to keep changing, maybe with the CHL stuff or whatever. Like, you take care of what you can take care of in your program. Hopefully, you have a really good culture, and then the players that want to be part of something like that usually will come, and that's and that's probably more so than when I started 15, 20 years ago. You get a player and they're there until they sign, or it's so good or so bad that they're willing to sit out a year. So yeah, it's just a really interesting time in our world right now, and it's exciting times up here just because the community loves it so much, and that's been really cool to see, the excitement around it again. But we wake up every day just going, okay, well, what are the rules today? And it's it's almost like a daily thing.
How much is it is an advantage to have a revitalized, a refreshed Alfond Arena in your back pocket for recruiting too. I mean, it is one of the gems in college hockey to play in.
Yeah, I never imagined. I mean, I knew obviously having been in this league for a while at other schools, like, what it was like up here. I never imagined, what it could be, because I never saw it in the 90s, early 2000s when, it was really rolling. We're doing a $50 million renovation right now that's going to be done at the end, for the start of the season next year. It is such an advantage for us, and now it's become just such a recruiting advantage, when you get to step out on that ice, and it's, I mean, it's electric in there an hour before the game starts. And, you don't see that in too many places anymore, probably at any level. So we're just super fortunate to have the greatest, I think, college hockey community up here. And that's a credit to everyone that, obviously decades of success that was here before us. And now they've seen a little bit of it, and it's just a huge advantage for us right now.
Going to head into a place that I imagine is going to be pretty jammed too. It's Conti Forum on Friday, and then on Sunday you've got that day off in between. Friday night, 7:00 game is on Nesson. I'm really excited to have that game. I may even have to try and sneak over to watch this one if I can get over there on a Friday night. Nothing like seeing another hockey game, right? I don't need to tell you, BC, one of the top, if not the top team in the country, depending on who you ask. So what are you looking for as you look ahead to this game on Friday night? What are you going to tell your team? What's your emphasis going to be, knowing how very dangerous BC can be?
I think it's just going to be important that our team understands, we're a totally different, makeup than BC, and, I think the team, if we're going to play an up and down the ice, exchange chances with them game, it's probably not going to, that's probably not a recipe for success for us, so I think it's really going to be important for us to understand, like, hopefully, we can hold on to pucks in the O zone and use our strength and our size maybe a little bit to our advantage and our maturity. We're an older team where they're, and they've always been this. They got a ton of talent. It's younger guys. So, the way to, hopefully, neutralize that a little bit is to use, we got some 23, 24-year-old guys out there that are, hopefully we can hold on to pucks and make them defend a little bit, but that's easier said than done. They're a phenomenal team. So it'll be a great challenge for us. It's obviously it'll be a little different than anyone that we've played yet, as far as just, the speed and the skill level.
Should be a ton of fun. It should be an awesome environment there. Really great college hockey game coming up Friday night again, 7:00 on Nesson. Ben, phenomenal to see you. Enjoy the week of preparation, and we'll see you on the network come Friday night. Good luck.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me, Billy.
All right. Well, we had a special night on Sunday, Jack Edwards night at TD Garden, just recognizing his greatness in the booth for 19 years, and just a powerful moment, Judd. It really was. I use the word powerful, and it's not hyperbolic, I don't think. It was fantastic to see Jack being walked into the broadcast booth with Charlie Jacobs and Sean McGrail, and to see the shot of him walking in with you and Brick standing there. There it is. There's the video right there. To see high above the ice in the Fred Cusick broadcast booth was just awesome. And I know you being there, was, from your perspective, what was that moment like for you?
It was wonderful. And I thought the Bruins organization, Nesson, they hit this one out of the park. The way that sign looks as you get into the booth is just spectacular. And I think one of the things that Jack had always talked about was, listen, he would wear his heart on his sleeve, and his heart and his passion was the Bruins. And you felt that for every broadcast across 19 seasons. So to see his reaction when he walked into the booth with Charlie and Sean, and he looked up and he saw that sign, you could tell how emotional he was and how heartfelt that gesture was and how much it meant to him. And I think that we might also have the footage, because he looked up and you could tell that he was welling up. And he hugged Brick, he hugged myself, and I wanted to make sure that the fans had a chance to see Jack and Jack to see the fans. And so we were able to get him up right to the front of the ledge, and he had a chance to wave and to see that outpouring of support and love. It was a wonderful, wonderful night. And you could tell how moved and how emotional he was to have that experience.
Yeah, I mean, just gonna let that breathe for a second. That was incredible, so cool. And another really cool moment, from my perspective, watching it, Judd. And I'd love to hear your thoughts being up there and being on the other end of this. Was when Jack, put his hand on your back and said, "You're doing a great job." That is just so special, right? Because this business, people move on and people, fill jobs, but like this was, you guys are connected forever, right? This is a family, and you're part of a legacy of Bruins play-by-play voices on NESN, and it was a sort of a passing of the torch moment. Did you feel that?
Oh, I definitely did. I'm very grateful and very thankful, that a guy like Jack, who set a standard, and he made a mark here in this town, doing games for the Bruins and around the National Hockey League, was so generous and so kind, and it really meant a lot to me to have that kind of support from Jack. And I think I had mentioned it during the broadcast. Even beyond that, in the previous 7 years, and we had talked after I left radio and I came over and came here to NESN, to have his support, to have those conversations that I think I mentioned, whether it was on the plane, in the booth, at an establishment, on the ski lift. He's a good friend, and it really meant a lot to me to hear that from him, and I'm very, very thankful.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool. It was a really cool moment. It was an outstanding night, and to your point, this is, you've had a friendship with Jack for a number of years. And I think that's what, he had said, it's a seamless transition. And that is why, because we've all been hanging out for a while now. And it was really cool. So a great night at TD Garden. Wanted to end on that note, wanted to end on a positive note, which has been one of our best Hockey Hub podcasts, I got to say, from start to finish. We talked a little bit about the Bruins. Unfortunately, things aren't going that way, going that well. It didn't go that well in Toronto. But Brad Park was awesome. Ben Barr was awesome. And talking about Jack Edwards' night was really cool. So we did it, Judd. We finished another one. Good job.
Number 11 is going to be even better.
I can't wait. Number 11 is on the horizon, and we hope you join us for it. Thanks for joining us for episode 10 of the Hockey Hub podcast. We'll see you next time.